My name is Robert Harrison, and I used to believe that generosity was its own reward. I thought that if you gave with a full heart, you'd be met with gratitude. That's what I believed for most of my life. Until the day my son handed me a receipt for $1,400, like I was some stranger who owed him rent. Let me back up. I wasn't born wealthy, but I worked like a man who had nothing to lose. For 39 years, I showed up to the same manufacturing plant in Columbus, Ohio, clocked in before sunrise, and came home smelling like oil and metal shavings. I saved every bonus, skipped vacations, drove used cars, and clipped coupons well into my 50s. Why? So that my family wouldn't have to. My wife Ellen was a school teacher, smart as a whip, always reminding me that kindness was a legacy worth leaving. And for years I believed we were building that legacy together. But after she passed, everything slowly shifted. Our son Ethan was in his late 20s by then, married, working in software development, driving a car I couldn't afford even with a decade's savings. Still, I thought I'd done something right. I thought he'd learned the values Ellen and I worked hard to teach. Then came the phone call. "Dad," Ethan said one Thursday morning, "I've hit a bit of a financial snag. It's nothing serious, but Emily and I could really use some help getting ahead of it." I didn't hesitate. "How much?" "Well, I was thinking, maybe something around $40,000. That's not a typo. $40,000. I nearly dropped the phone. He rushed to clarify. "Just to consolidate some things. Credit card stuff, closing costs from refinancing, and a few medical bills from Emily's pregnancy. We've just been stretched really thin." I asked for a day to think it over, though my mind was already racing. I had that kind of money tucked away, but not as spending cash. It was the emergency fund, the just in case I get sick and can't work fund. But this was my son, and I had always told him, if you're ever in a hole, I'll be your ladder. So I met him the next day, wrote the check for $50,000 instead. I figured, give him a cushion, let him breathe. He looked surprised, then relieved, said, "Wow, Dad, I don't even know what to say." I smiled. "You don't have to say anything. Just be smart with it." He hugged me, told me he loved me, and left. That was a Tuesday. 2 days later, Thursday morning, I got an email. Subject line, "Ticket confirmation, $1,400, payment due." Inside was a forwarded airline reservation. First class, 2 adults, 2 children. Destination, Maui, vacation package. Below it, a message from Ethan. "Hey Dad, this is the total. If you could send over the $1,400 for our family's plane tickets like we discussed, I'd appreciate it. Cheers." Cheers. Not thank you. Not I know. You just gave me a small fortune. Just cheers. My hands went cold. I reread the email 3 times, trying to remember if I'd ever promised more. Had I agreed to pay for this trip too? Had he misunderstood my gesture? Or worse, had he never seen it as a gesture at all? I stared at the screen, heart pounding, mind unraveling, and in that moment, I realized something I never wanted to believe. My son didn't see me as a father anymore. He saw me as a wallet with a pulse. I didn't respond to the email. Not at first. I sat there, hands hovering over the keyboard, staring at the message like it was written in a foreign language. Something about it felt so casual, so businesslike, that it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My son, my flesh and blood, was asking for another $1,400, not with humility, not even with hesitation, but with the entitlement of a man billing a client. I kept wondering, how did we get here? 2 days ago, I gave him 50 grand. That check didn't come with an invoice or a contract. It came from years of hard work and decades of sacrifice. And now, less than 48 hours later, I was being asked to fund a vacation. I clicked on the attached itinerary again. The hotel alone was nearly $9,000. A beachfront resort with a private pool and ocean view suite. The kind of luxury Ellen and I had only ever dreamed about, back when we were splitting one cheeseburger at a roadside diner on our anniversary. I thought about the time Ethan was 10 and wanted a bicycle. We couldn't afford a new one, so I found a used one at a yard sale and repainted it in the garage late at night. He cried with joy when he saw it. Back then, he still saw value in things that weren't shiny, but somewhere along the way, something changed. I picked up the phone and called him. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Dad, did you get the email?" "I did," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Oh good. So, could you send the payment today? The rates might go up tomorrow." "Ethan," I said slowly, "did you already book the tickets?" "Well, yeah, I used my card, but I figured you'd be covering it since you said you wanted to help." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I gave you $50,000, that was the help." He paused. "Yeah, and I appreciate that. But I thought the vacation was separate." "I never agreed to pay for a vacation," I said, voice tightening. "I mean, come on Dad. You've always said we should make memories while the kids are young. Isn't that what you and Mom used to believe in?" He was trying to use her words, twist them. I took a deep breath. "What I believed in, Ethan, was living within your means, not creating memories at someone else's expense." The line was quiet for a second. Then came the sigh. "You know what? Forget it. I'll figure it out." "Good," I said, and hung up. I sat there afterwards staring at the wall, stunned by how easily he dismissed me. Not just the money but the sentiment behind it. As if I was just a bank account that talked too much. And that's when something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, and the slow erosion of it over years of small, seemingly harmless entitlements. I realized that every time I'd said yes without hesitation, I hadn't been teaching him generosity. I'd been teaching him to expect more. And now, I was about to teach him something else: boundaries. The next morning, I walked into the bank with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months, maybe even years. I wasn't angry, not in the shouting, slamming doors kind of way. I was clear, and clarity, when you've been taken for granted long enough, feels like a kind of quiet power. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison," the teller greeted me. Same branch I'd been using for over 3 decades. They knew me here, knew that I didn't make sudden changes unless I had a very good reason. "I'd like to make some account updates," I said, sliding over my ID and bank card. Within half an hour, I had frozen a joint account that Ethan had access to, the same one I opened for emergencies when he first went off to college. He hadn't used it in years, but it was still technically active. Then I opened a new trust account, quietly, privately. No beneficiaries listed yet, just options. As I left the bank, the receptionist smiled and said, "Anything else we can help you with today, Mr. Harrison?" "No," I replied. Today was for me. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out a stack of old letters. Ellen and I used to exchange before we had cell phones. She had always been better at saying what I was feeling before I could. Her handwriting, still elegant after all these years, seemed to whisper from the page, "Don't let giving become your identity, Rob. You're allowed to draw a line without guilt, even with the people you love." I ran my finger over the line again. Read it twice. That afternoon I picked up the phone and called Ethan. He answered with a bit more hesitation this time. Hey, I replied. "I've been thinking about our last conversation." He sighed. "Look, Dad, I know you're upset, but can we not drag this out?" "This isn't about dragging anything out," I said. "It's about setting things right. And part of that is telling you something I should have said a long time ago." "What's that?" "You need to learn the difference between a gift and an obligation." Silence. I kept going. "I gave you that money because I wanted to help you, not because I owed you, and certainly not because I'm your financial safety net." "Okay," he said flatly. "No," I said, "not okay, like you're brushing it off." I want you to understand what I'm saying. That money was more than a check. It was decades of effort, of sacrifice, and when you asked for more, for something so frivolous, without so much as a thank you, it made me feel invisible. Another pause. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, he said. I believe you, I said, but that doesn't change the fact that you did. He didn't respond, and for once I didn't fill the silence. After a while he said, so what now? Now, I said, we take a breath. And maybe for the first time in a while we both sit with what we've become. I'm still your father. I still love you, but I'm not your wallet, and I won't be treated like one. I hear you, he said quietly. Good, because I'm not sure I'll keep repeating it. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. Drawing a boundary might not come wrapped in ribbons or met with applause, but it's still a gift to yourself. A week passed, then two. No calls, no texts, just the quiet buzz of unanswered space between us, and strangely I didn't feel panic. I felt relief, like I had finally stepped out of a room that had grown too loud with expectations. I spent those days clearing out the garage. It was something Ellen used to nag me about. Her organized chaos, she'd call it, smiling every time I tripped over one of her storage bins. In the back corner, tucked behind a dusty toolbox and an old Christmas wreath, I found the briefcase. It was leather, worn at the edges, with my initials stamped in brass. RH inside were folders, tax records, land titles, my original will, and at the bottom the one item I hadn't looked at in years. The envelope. It was addressed in Ellen's handwriting. On the front it read, "To be opened if Robert forgets who he is." I had almost forgotten it existed. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. Inside was a letter, just one page. "Robert, if you're reading this, it means life has done what it always does, clouded the clarity you once held with such dignity. Maybe someone has let you down. Maybe the world feels heavier than it should. But please remember, you were never just a provider. You were a builder. You built a life, a family, and that was never measured in dollars. Love isn't about giving endlessly until there's nothing left. It's about knowing when to say, this far, and no farther. You always said you'd protect us. Now protect yourself too. Love always, Ellen." I read the letter 5 times. Each time it peeled back another layer of guilt, of weariness, of second-guessing. That Sunday, I went to church. First time in months. Afterward, I stayed behind, sitting in the pew as the place emptied out. The silence of that chapel brought something forward I hadn't allowed myself to feel fully: grief. Not just for Ellen, but for the fatherhood I thought I had mastered, for the expectations I had poured into Ethan, for the slow realization that even your own child can disappoint you in ways that scrape the soul raw. A man sat down next to me, Pastor Jim. He'd known Ellen and me for years. "You all right, Rob?" "I think I'm learning to be," I said. He gave a knowing nod. "Sometimes peace looks like choosing yourself again." I left the chapel lighter, not because Ethan had changed. He hadn't called, he hadn't apologized. But I had changed. I was finally starting to see the difference between what I gave freely and what was being taken. That night I placed Ellen's letter in a frame beside my bed, a quiet reminder that I hadn't lost myself, not yet. I started spending my mornings at a little cafe down the road, the kind with chipped mugs, mismatched chairs, and a chalkboard menu that always listed the soup of the day as surprise. Ellen and I used to come here after Sunday service. She'd order the same thing every time: chamomile tea and a slice of banana bread. I could almost hear her voice still echoing across the booth. One morning, as I sat sipping black coffee and reading the local paper, a man in his 30s sat down across from me. "Mr. Harrison?" I looked up, puzzled. He had a familiar face, but I couldn't place it. "It's me, Logan Tate. You were my welding instructor at Ridgeview High." Now it clicked. Logan had been one of the more restless kids in my shop class, always tapping his foot, always asking if the assignment counted for a grade. But he had heart. When his mother passed, I remembered keeping him after class a few times, just to give him space to talk or not talk at all. He smiled. I saw you walk in and couldn't believe it. Been meaning to thank you for a long time. For what? I asked. For giving a damn, he said. Back then I didn't know how to process anything. But you kept showing up. You gave me a ride home once when my uncle forgot. Brought an extra lunch when you found out we couldn't afford groceries that week. I stared at him, blinking. You remember all that? I do, he said. More than you'd think. And I tell my kids about it. That some people give without needing to be seen. We talked for nearly an hour. He worked now as a mechanic, had 2 daughters, and was renovating his first home. He pulled out his phone to show me pictures, not to impress me, but like he wanted me to know he'd made something of himself. Before he left, he reached into his wallet and took out a folded photograph. I keep this in my toolbox, he said. It's from our shop class field trip. You're standing behind us covered in soot, holding that busted propane torch like a trophy. I laughed. I hadn't seen that photo in decades. Thought you might want a copy, he said, handing it to me. As he walked out, I sat there holding the picture, and I realized something that struck me like a jolt of cold air. The son I had poured everything into hadn't thanked me once. But this former student, someone I barely remembered saving, still carried my kindness in his pocket. That night, I made a quiet decision, the kind that doesn't come from anger, but from clarity. If I was going to leave something behind when my time came, it wouldn't go to the loudest voice. It would go to the one who remembered. It had been nearly a month since Ethan's last message. No calls, no texts, not even a forwarded meme or an accidental Happy Friday group chat. And strangely, I didn't miss the noise. What I missed was the son I thought I had, the boy who used to sneak notes into my lunchbox when he was 10, scribbling in crayon, "Hope your sandwich is good, Dad." That boy was long gone, and I had to make peace with the man who replaced him. I sat down at my desk one afternoon and opened a fresh sheet of paper. Not an email, not a text, a real letter. The kind you write when the silence in your chest gets too loud. Ethan, I'm writing this not because I expect a reply, but because I need to say a few things out loud, for my own sake. When I gave you that check, it wasn't about money, it was about belief. Belief that you would take that help and turn it into something lasting. Something that reflected the values your mother and I tried to raise you with. But when you sent that message about the plane tickets so casually, so entitled, it cut deeper than I can explain. It wasn't the dollar amount. It was the message beneath it, that my years of sacrifice were invisible to you, that your needs would always outweigh my limits. Maybe that's not what you meant. Maybe you were just tired or distracted. But it made me question everything I'd done right and everything I might have done wrong. I still love you. That won't change. But my love can no longer come at the expense of my own dignity. So if you want to rebuild something, anything between us, it has to start with you showing up. Not with a request, but with respect. Until then, take care of yourself. I'm still rooting for you. I always have been. Dad, I folded the letter carefully, and then I tucked it into my desk drawer, without an envelope, without a stamp, because I wasn't sure yet if I wanted it to reach him. Some truths are meant to be spoken, not necessarily delivered. That night, I poured myself a whiskey and stood by the window, watching the streetlight flicker across the driveway. My house had grown quieter over the years, but in that moment, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The next morning, I made another trip to the bank. This time, I updated my estate plan. I removed Ethan as the sole beneficiary, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom. Legacy, I had come to learn, is not just about who shares your blood, it's about who honors your name. It was a quiet Tuesday when my phone rang. I was out in the shed fixing the hinge on an old toolbox when I heard it buzz on the workbench. I picked it up without looking at the caller ID. "Hello, Mr. Harrison? It's Emily. Emily, my daughter-in-law, Ethan's wife. I hadn't heard from her since Christmas. She always sounded polite, distant, like someone carefully balancing loyalty and discomfort in the same breath. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time," she said. "Not at all," I replied, brushing sawdust off my hands. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. "I just wanted to say, I heard about what happened. With the money, the vacation, the email. So she knew." "I see," I said cautiously. "I didn't agree with it," she said quickly. "I told Ethan it wasn't right. That asking you for that kind of money, especially after what you already gave, was, well, it was wrong." I sat down on the edge of the workbench. "That means a lot to hear, Emily. Thank you." Another pause. "I also wanted to say, I'm sorry," she said, "for not speaking up sooner, for not reaching out myself. You've done more for our family than most people ever do." There was something in her voice that caught me off guard. Sincerity. Real, unfiltered regret. "I appreciate that," I said. "Truly." She hesitated, then added, "I don't think Ethan realizes how much he's hurt you, or how close he is to losing something he can't replace." I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see it. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I am tired. Tired of pretending that being a good father means being treated like I'm invisible." There was a long silence before she finally spoke again. "I just thought you should hear it from someone." And then, before she hung up, she added something that stuck with me. "You're not invisible, Mr. Harrison. Not to me, not to the kids. They still talk about the wooden train set you made them. Every time they see it, they say, 'Grandpa made this.'" After the call, I stood in the shed for a long time, staring at that old toolbox. A man can spend decades building things, homes, toys, bank accounts, bridges. But the hardest thing to build is a boundary, especially with the people you love most. But maybe, just maybe, I hadn't lost all of them. Maybe some part of what I built still stood, even if it wasn't where I expected to find it. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with gold lettering on the front. It arrived in the mail one Saturday morning, tucked between the electricity bill and a postcard from the dentist. I knew the handwriting, Ethan. I stood in the foyer, turning it over in my hand like it might burn me. The flap was already slightly peeled, as if he'd pressed it down and reconsidered. My name was written in full, Robert Harrison. Not Dad, not Pop, just formal, like a business letter. Inside was an invitation. "Please join us for Clara and Max's 5th birthday celebration. Saturday, 3 p.m., Lakeside Pavilion." No personal note, no apology, just details. I leaned against the wall, rereading it twice. There was something hollow about it, like a gesture made out of obligation, not affection. Still, part of me stirred. I hadn't seen the twins in months, missed a few milestones. I didn't want them to grow up thinking I'd disappeared, but I also didn't want to walk into a room where I was only tolerated. I spent the day debating. The idea of showing up and being met with polite smiles and sideways glances made my stomach turn. But then I thought of what Emily had said, how the kids still remembered me, how the wooden train set still sat in their playroom. So that afternoon, I changed into my best flannel, wrapped 2 presents with ribbon Ellen would have chosen, and drove across town with my window cracked open, just enough to smell the spring air. The park was crowded. Balloons, picnic tables, a clown with more makeup than talent. I spotted Ethan near the grill, wearing sunglasses and chatting with a group of dads. Emily was helping Clara into a party hat. The twins were laughing, racing each other across the grass. They hadn't seen me yet. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should wait to be noticed or walk away quietly. Then Clara looked up. "Grandpa," she broke into a sprint and ran straight to me, arms wide. I dropped to one knee just in time to catch her. Did you come for my party? She beamed. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, voice cracking. Max wasn't far behind, tugging at my hand and pointing to the cake. It's blue, like the trains you made. Ethan finally turned, his sunglasses hiding whatever emotion might have flickered across his face. Hey, he said, flat. Hey, I replied. We didn't shake hands, didn't hug, just nodded, like two men acknowledging a fragile ceasefire. But Emily came over, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, and whispered, I'm glad you came. So was I. Not for Ethan, for the kids, because while some bridges collapse, others can still be crossed by small feet and open hearts. That evening, after the cake had been cut and the presents unwrapped, Clara handed me a crayon drawing, stick figures, one tall, one short, both with gray hair. Me and you, she said proudly. You're the best. I folded it carefully and placed it in my shirt pocket, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt remembered. A few days after the birthday party, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Ethan. Not a text, not an email, a real phone call. The kind that carried weight just by showing up. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello, Dad, he said, voice uncertain. You got a minute? I hesitated, then sat down on the porch step. I do. There was a long pause, like he was assembling the words as he spoke. I've been thinking about everything. The money, the trip, what I said or didn't say. I waited, let the silence stretch. I didn't realize how bad it looked, he continued. I didn't mean to treat you like an ATM. I don't know. I've been overwhelmed. Work, bills, kids. It's like everything feels like it's on fire all the time. I understand stress, I said, but stress isn't a license to disrespect people who've carried you. I know, he said quietly. I've been selfish. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. I appreciated you coming to the party, he added. The kids were so happy. Clara hasn't stopped talking about the train set. She made me promise to fix the broken caboose. She mentioned that I said, use wood glue and clamps overnight. Don't rush it. I might need help, he said. That's not a bad thing, I replied. But you've got to ask for help like a man, not like a prince asking his servant to carry the crown. He chuckled, a little embarrassed. Yeah, fair. There was another pause, softer this time. Would you want to come by for dinner this weekend? He asked. Nothing fancy, just the five of us. I didn't say yes right away, not out of bitterness, just out of caution, because rebuilding anything, especially trust, takes time. I'll think about it, I said, and I meant it. That night, I pulled out the old photo Logan had given me at the cafe, the one from my welding class, my arms around kids who barely knew how to hold a torch, grinning like they'd built the Eiffel Tower out of scrap metal. I placed it beside the drawing Clara had given me, two tiny stick figures under a crayon sun, and right then, I knew what I had to do next. The following morning, I went back to the bank. Meredith, my estate attorney, met me in the conference room, a neat stack of documents already arranged. Are we finalizing today? She asked. Yes, I said, but with one revision. She tilted her head. Another change. Yes, not out of revenge, I said, out of clarity, because forgiveness may be free, but restoring trust always comes with terms. Meredith adjusted her glasses, pen poised above the documents. So walk me through what you'd like to change. I took a breath and leaned forward. Remove Ethan as the sole heir. She didn't flinch. Meredith had been drafting wills and trusts for 30 years. Nothing rattled her. Okay, and who's replacing him? Split it evenly, I said. 1/3 for each of the twins, Clara and Max, to be held in trust until they turn 25. Emily gets 1/3 in her name, outright. And Ethan, she asked. He gets a letter. She stopped writing. A letter? I nodded. Attached to the trust, not a legal one. A personal one. Meredith smiled faintly. I've only seen that once before. A man in his 80s left a note to his children explaining his will. Said it helped them understand his decision. That's what I want, I said. I'm not trying to cut Ethan out of spite. I'm just no longer willing to hand over what I've spent my life building to someone who sees it as an entitlement instead of a legacy. She scribbled something and nodded. Understood. That evening I sat at my kitchen table, the one Ellen and I picked out at a flea market in '92, and started to write. Ethan, by now you'll know you weren't listed as the primary heir in my will. That's probably hurtful, maybe even confusing. But I hope this letter helps you understand why. What I leave behind, every dollar, every asset, every acre, was not built overnight. It was earned in overtime. It came at the cost of bad knees, missed vacations, and years of saying no to myself so I could say yes to you. When I gave you that check, I hoped it would plant something. Responsibility, gratitude, awareness. Instead, I got a bill for plane tickets. That moment broke something in me, not because of the money, but because of what it revealed. You expected more, not because you needed it, but because you assumed I would always give it. I still love you, Ethan. That hasn't changed, but love doesn't mean I will let myself be drained dry by your expectations. Love, real love, has limits. So instead, I've chosen to invest in the next generation, your kids. Because they remind me of you before entitlement crept in. They still see magic in wooden trains and value in homemade cards. This isn't a punishment. It's a course correction. And if you ever come to understand that truly, then maybe we can rebuild. But this time from the ground up. Dad, I folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope marked simply, to my son. Then I placed it inside the file that Meredith would lock away until the time came. It didn't feel cruel. It felt right. Because at some point in life you stop chasing people who don't see you and you start building for those who do. The next Saturday, I stood outside Ethan's front door, casserole dish in one hand, bottle of root beer in the other. I wasn't sure what I was doing there exactly. Maybe following through on the invitation. Maybe testing the water. Emily answered. Her eyes lit up. You came. Wouldn't miss dinner, I said. Besides, I figured someone needs to teach Max how to properly butter cornbread. She laughed and stepped aside. Come on in. The twins are already arguing about who gets to sit next to you. Inside, the house smelled of roasted chicken and lemon pie. Clara raced around the corner, arms wide, followed by Max with sticky hands and a face full of frosting from helping in the kitchen. Ethan appeared a moment later. His posture was stiff, like he hadn't yet decided what version of himself he needed to be. Hey, Dad, he said. Ethan, we nodded, like two men who knew the last conversation hadn't solved everything, but had at least reopened the door. We ate at the table together, the same table where I had once helped him with math homework, where Ellen once braided Clara's hair during a thunderstorm to distract her from the noise. The same table where I now watched a family form, imperfect, noisy, but growing. Emily brought out dessert. Clara tugged at my sleeve. Grandpa, tell us the story about the raccoon in your garage again. I laughed. Only if Max tells me the one about how he beat the robot boss in that video game. We traded tales, jokes, and laughter like currency, the kind no bank account could hold. Ethan was quiet for most of it, watching, listening, maybe learning. As the night wound down and the twins disappeared to their bedroom, he walked me to the door. I know I can't undo what I said, or what I asked for, he said, eyes down. No, I replied, but you can choose what comes next. He looked up. And if I want to fix it, I paused, then placed a hand on his shoulder. Then start by showing up. Not for money, not for things, just be present. He nodded slowly. I'm trying, he said. I know. That night, back at home, I sat in my recliner and stared at the fireplace. Ellen's letter was still in its frame beside the lamp. Clara's crayon drawing had been joined by Max's, a wobbly house with 3 stick figures and a label in shaky letters, Grandpa's home. I thought about legacies again, not the kind you sign on legal documents, but the kind carved in laughter and second chances, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself the luxury of hope, because sometimes the best revenge isn't taking back what was taken, it's rebuilding something better than they expected you to survive. Spring melted into early summer, and my days found new rhythm. Mornings started with coffee on the porch, afternoons with sawdust under my fingernails. I'd begun building a new wooden train set in the shed, this one bigger, more detailed. Max had requested a tunnel. Clara wanted a bridge that looked like the rainbow, so I was doing both. Kids have a way of making you dream again, even when your body protests. Ethan visited more often now, not to ask for anything but just to be around. We didn't talk about the past, not directly, but you could feel the undercurrent of understanding rising beneath every word. Once, while helping me drill the base for the train set, he asked, "Did you always know how to do this stuff?" I smiled. "No, I learned by messing up." He nodded, tapping a nail into place. "Seems to be my method too." We chuckled. It was small, but it was something. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Logan, the former student from the cafe. Inside was a photo of his finished house, a business card for his new auto shop, and a handwritten note. "Mr. Harrison, the torch you lit in shop class is still burning. Just wanted you to know you changed more lives than you ever realized. Stop by any time. First tune-up is on me." I folded the note and placed it in the same drawer where I kept Ellen's letter and the kids' drawings. Legacy, I realized, isn't who remembers your birthday. It's who remembers your influence. One quiet Sunday, I drove past the cemetery where Ellen rested. I hadn't visited in a while, not because I'd forgotten, but because grief over time shifts from something you confront to something you carry. I brought flowers, sunflowers, her favorite, laid them gently on the stone. "I'm okay," I whispered. I found my way back. I sat there for a while, talking to her like I always did, told her about Clara's drawing, Max's tunnel, Ethan's effort, told her about the letter from Logan, about the will. "You were right," I said. "Giving isn't about draining yourself dry. It's about planting where something will grow." Before I left, I slipped a folded copy of my own letter, the one to Ethan, into the pocket of my jacket. I no longer feared whether he'd get it someday, because in the months that followed, I watched him earn back something I thought was gone for good. My trust, not with grand gestures, but in the little things. A repaired bike tire for Max, a pie baked with Clara, a Sunday dinner with no excuses, a quiet look during a backyard barbecue that said, "I'm trying," and that was enough. So when Meredith called to confirm the final revisions to my will, I told her, "Leave it as is." She hesitated. "No update for Ethan." I smiled. "No, he doesn't need it. Because he's made peace with your decision. Because I said he finally understands it." In the end, I didn't need to take anything away from him. I simply gave everything to those who remembered what it meant to matter. It was a hot Tuesday in July when Meredith called again. "We need to finalize the will's reading format," she said. "Standard notification clause, or a private family gathering." I thought for a moment. "Let's do something simple but personal. A reading. Just family." She nodded on the other end. "And I assume you'll want to keep your previous letters included." "Yes," I said, "but I'm adding one more." After we hung up, I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. The first letter to Ethan had been hard. This one was different. It came from a place of balance. "Ethan, if you're hearing this, then I've finally left this old world behind, hopefully peacefully, and hopefully with fewer regrets than most. But I wanted to leave you with one last note, because I believe in words that last longer than breath. I see you now, the way I used to, full of potential, not pressure. You've come a long way from that day you sent me a bill for a plane ticket. And believe me, I never thought we'd find our way back after that. But you did the work. You showed up. You became a better man, not because I demanded it, but because you chose it. That means more to me than anything money could have bought. By now you'll see how I structured the estate. The kids and Emily are secure. And you? Well, I left you something more valuable than inheritance. I left you a second chance, and you took it. That, son, is your legacy now. Dad, I placed that letter in a new envelope, marked clearly with his name, and tucked it into the updated will packet. The strange thing about writing your own goodbye is that it clarifies what matters. You stop worrying about who was right and who was wrong, and you start focusing on who grew from it. That night I had dinner with the whole family on my back porch. Clara and Max ran barefoot through the grass. Ethan grilled burgers while Emily brought out lemonade. The sky turned orange, then purple, and for once nobody picked up their phone. Nobody talked about work or money, or who had time for what. We just were. Later, Ethan sat beside me as we watched the stars come out. I don't think I ever thanked you, he said. Not just for the money or the second chances, but for not giving up on me. I looked over at him, my son, older now, humbled, aware. You did thank me, I said. You just didn't use words. He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man trying to fix the past. I felt like a father who had finally seen his son become one too. There's a quiet spot not far from my house, Willow Lake. Ellen and I used to go there on weekends before the kids came along. Back when money was tight but time was abundant. We'd sit on the same old bench under a crooked oak tree and watch the sun ripple across the water like it was trying to write poetry in light. I hadn't been back in years, but one early morning just before the 4th of July, I felt a pull I couldn't explain. I packed a thermos of coffee, grabbed a flannel even though the sun was already rising, and drove out there before the town woke up. The bench was still there, a little more weathered like me. I sat down slowly, letting the silence settle around me like an old coat. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange peace. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because the pieces that had been out of place for so long were finally beginning to shift back where they belonged. I sipped my coffee and watched a father down by the dock helping his daughter bait a fishing hook. She squealed every time the worm wriggled. He laughed and leaned closer, showing her how to hold the line. I smiled. It reminded me of Ethan and me, years ago, before the noise. Before the grown-up egos and the mistakes we both made. He had come a long way since those hard weeks. It wasn't just the dinners, or the calls. It was the way he showed up at Clara's school play early, and saved me a seat in the front. The way he started checking in not with excuses, but with questions. Honest ones. Need help with the shed, Dad? How's your back feeling? You want to come with us to church this weekend? Small things, but real things. I pulled a folded note from my jacket pocket. Something I'd scribbled days before. Some debts aren't paid in dollars, they're paid in presence. I wrote that for myself, a reminder that legacy isn't measured by what you leave behind, but by what you pass forward. And in Ethan's case, he was starting to pass forward the right things. When I got back home later that morning, I placed the note on the fridge with a magnet that said, #1 Grandpa. Then I sat in the backyard, train set blueprints spread across the patio table, and began sketching plans for a miniature village to go alongside Max's new tunnel. I didn't need applause. I didn't need repayment. I had what mattered now, a son who finally saw me, and grandchildren who never stopped. And somewhere inside all that, I found the old version of myself again, not just a provider, a builder, a father. 2 months later, Meredith called again. "Robert," she said, with a familiar smile in her voice, "we're done. Everything is signed, filed, and locked in. All documents are secure. Even the updates to the trust structure. I asked. All of it, she confirmed. And I have to say, I've seen a lot of estate plans, but this one, it's personal, it's clear, and it's powerful. I hung up feeling a deep calm. The legacy I once imagined, leaving everything to Ethan by default, was no longer what mattered. I had rewritten not just a will, but an entire family script. I hadn't disinherited my son out of spite. I had redirected the inheritance to where love flowed back, not just out. Weeks later, I invited everyone over for a small dinner, one of those late summer nights when the air turns gold and everything feels slow and close. Clara and Max helped me set the table in the backyard. Emily brought sweet tea. Ethan arrived a little late but carrying a toolbox. He'd come straight from fixing the kids' bunk bed. We ate under the hanging lights I'd strung along the fence, and for once no one talked about bills or work. It was just us. Near the end of the night, I tapped my glass gently and said, "There's something I want to share." Everyone turned to me. "I've finished my will," I said, "and I want you to know that I've left something special for each of you." Ethan looked a little nervous. I continued, "Clara and Max, when you're grown, you'll each receive a share of my estate, but not just money. You'll get a letter from me, a train set with your names carved into the tracks and the deeds to this house." Their eyes lit up, though I doubt they understood the weight of it yet. "Emily," I said, turning to her, "you've been a steady heart in this family. You stood up when things were quiet but wrong. You reminded me that grace doesn't always shout. I left you the funds to pay off this home and start your own business if you ever choose." She blinked back tears. "Thank you, Robert." "And Ethan," I said, pausing. He swallowed, bracing for it. "I didn't leave you money," I said calmly, "because you've already received what matters, the chance to rebuild trust, and I want you to earn what you pass on." He looked stunned, but not angry, just quiet. I slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a letter. A new one. "Dear Ethan, I didn't write this to punish you. I wrote it to remind you, real inheritance is not cash, it's character. You've already begun to earn that back, piece by piece. If you continue, then the rest will come, not from my bank, but from your own life. If you stay the man you've become, you'll build more than I ever could, not in money but in meaning, and in the end, that's what truly lasts." "Dad," he folded the letter slowly, eyes glistening. "I understand," he said, and I believed him. That night, after everyone left and the backyard had gone quiet, I sat alone beneath the porch light, sipping the last of the iced tea. I had no empire, no $1 million estate, but I had something better. I had turned pain into purpose, entitlement into boundaries, silence into strength, and the sweetest revenge, not taking back what was owed, but proving I was never as small as they once treated me.